Hi everyone, today I am going to be talking about John Watson and his views on behaviorism and his studies. So he was born in South Carolina, so he was born in the US, and he grew up very religious. This is kind of just something interesting that I found about him. That is just in chapter 12 of our book. He grew up really religious. His mother was very religious. His father wasn't, but his mother was. And he had a fear of the dark because she talked a lot about fearing the devil. But he had a fear of the dark all growing up, and he felt like he still had it as an adult. And he actually tried to study it in children to see if they're born with a fear of the dark, which is pretty interesting. And like I said, he studied behaviorism. He was a student at the University of Chicago, and he was actually the youngest person to graduate with a doctoral degree at the age of 25. He studied white rats and their development, and that's kind of what brought him to his behaviorism, a lot like animal behavior. And then he used comparative psychology from rats to humans. So he compared the development of the rats to development of humans. And he was actually kind of shut down for that. People didn't really like that idea of being compared to animals. And so he was kind of shut down when it came to that. Then he became a professor at the University of Chicago, and him and one of his colleagues found they did an experiment where they put rats in a maze, and the rats had to find their way through the maze, and they tried to blind them or make it so they couldn't hear or things like that. And every time they made it through the maze, and they found out that they used kinesthetic sensations to find their way to the end of the maze. He also studied birds and like the homing sensation of birds and the way they migrate. And then him and that same colleague actually started what's now called sports psychology, because they studied it with archers. He then taught at Johns Hopkins, and that is where he introduced his behaviorism ideas and was also shut down again for that. Anyways, he went on to do lectures, and one of which is Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It, and that's actually pretty fundamental in behaviorism today. Then he joined the military in 1917, so he took a little break for the war, and then when he came back, he switched to advertising, and he regretted not continuing his studies in psychology and behaviorism. He wished he would have stuck with his first love and kept studying psychology. He shared a lot of the same ideas with Russian psychologists like Pavlov and animal behavior and things like that. He studied learned versus innate behavior, or instinctual behavior, or behavior that you learn as you go throughout your life. And then he also thought that a stimulus could be general, either internal or environmental. So you can be stimulated by things that are around you or things that are internally stimulating. And a response was anything that the organism did. So, for example, with rats, the stimulus could be for going through the maze, that they were put in this maze and they needed to be pushed through, or they needed to find their way out. So that was an environmental stimulus. And the response was the rat finding its way through the maze, or getting out of the maze. That wasn't necessarily like a super new idea, but Pavlov did share similar ideas as Watson. So yeah, he really was a great voice when it came to behavior. And it's really cool that he started with animal behavior, and then he started to go with human behavior, and that he studied development first before he studied specific behaviors. So that's just a little bit about Watson, and thank you guys for listening.